Saturday marked 2 years since Russia invaded Ukraine, and as the war drags on, American support for aiding Ukraine is starting to wane. Now, according to a recent AP-NORC poll, 45% of Americans now think that the United States is spending too much money helping Ukraine. And to add to that, Americans are also divided on whether they support sending humanitarian aid to Palestinians amid Israel's ongoing war with militant group Hamas in Gaza. Now, as you can see, the 2024 presidential election is shaping up to be one in which the foreign policy stakes for our country are far higher than usual. One survey found that 4 in 10 voters ranked the issue among their top concerns. And this is a topic where Biden and Trump offer radically different solutions and visions for the U.S.'s role in the world. Trump's America First nationalism versus Biden's global pro-democracy crusade. Trump argues that Biden is a globalist who puts foreign countries' needs above the interest of American voters, whether factory workers in Ohio or U.S. soldiers stationed in the Middle East. And speaking of, most Americans want to keep U.S. troops out of foreign conflicts. This is a video you do not want to miss, guys, so stay right there. So first, here's President Joe Biden. Listen carefully as he confused airdropping aid to Gaza with Ukraine. Check it out.
In the coming days, we're going to join with our friends in Jordan and others in providing airdrops of additional food and supplies into Ukraine and seek to continue to open up other avenues into Ukraine, including the possibility of a marine corridor to deliver large amounts of humanitarian assistance. In addition to expanding deliveries by land, as I said, we're going to insist that Israel facilitate more trucks and more routes to get more and more people the help they need. No excuses, because the truth is, aid flowing to Gaza is nowhere nearly enough.
You know, this is the kind of clip that really makes people, one, think that Biden is too old for a second term, and two, that he's just basically filling his pockets with whatever supposed foreign aid they can get approved. Now, I've been reading your comments, guys, and each day I've been seeing more people saying that the U.S. should really stop giving money to Ukraine and these other countries, at least until we solve our problems at home first. You know what I mean? What can I tell you guys? 2 years into this war, and the American support for Ukraine is down. So from the get-go, Americans were on board with helping Ukraine, but they had their limits. At the start, many experts were worried about Russia steamrolling Ukraine and potentially dragging Europe and NATO into it. That's why a whopping 71% of Americans viewed Russia as a serious threat. As a poll by YouGov, the Economist, just before the war started, Americans also supported economic sanctions almost immediately imposed by President Joe Biden's administration and the European Union. Biden even announced more sanctions recently. A plurality of Americans also support financial aid to Ukraine to help fight off the attack. But even then, 51% wanted the U.S.'s role to be minor, according to an AP-NORC poll conducted just before the conflict. And when it came to the idea of sending troops to Ukraine to take on Russian forces, well, most Americans were against it. 55% of respondents of the YouGov Economist poll also thought it was a bad idea to send U.S. troops to Ukraine to help fight Russian soldiers. Support for sending troops was relatively low, even in extreme hypothetical scenarios like Russia annexing all of Ukraine, at least according to Morning Consult polling from February 19th through the 20th of 2022. But here's the thing, guys. Ukraine managed to hold its ground, retaining control of its capital city and blocking many Russian incursions. Over the summer, they even began a counteroffensive that grabbed back some of the border cities that Russia had snatched and pushed Russian troops back. But let's be real. Ukraine did not pull this off by themselves. Ukraine did that with a massive amount of aid from the US and other countries. The Biden administration and Congress have funneled more than $75 billion into the war effort, along with almost $47 billion in aid from European Union as of December. EU countries also agreed earlier this month to spend an additional $54 billion through 2027. The latest efforts are providing military aid from the US, though have been kind of stuck in Congress limbo right now. See, cutting Ukraine aid from a budget deal package was a sticking point in the negotiations that ultimately led to the ouster of now House Speaker Kevin McCarthy in October. Under the new Speaker, Mike Johnson, the fight is still going on. There's this $95 billion foreign aid package that includes funding for Ukraine has been tied up in negotiations. The House even clocked out for recess without pushing it through, despite the White House breathing down their necks. Biden even called Mike Johnson and, together with Vice President Kamala Harris, House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, and Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell tried to pressure Johnson into putting the foreign aid bill on the House floor. After the meeting, Johnson stood firm and said that the first priority of the country is our border border and making sure it's secure. And it definitely looks like more and more Americans are on Johnson's side here. 45% of Americans now think that the U.S. is spending too much money helping Ukraine, according to a recent AP-NORC poll. Ukraine aid is especially unpopular with Republicans, 59% of whom said that the U.S. had spent too much. Same with supporters of former President Donald Trump. Only about a third of Trump supporters favored ongoing Ukrainian funding in an Ipsos Chicago Council on Global Affairs poll, while 59% of anti-Trump Republicans favored it. And honestly, I get the point. A friend of mine, he fought in Vietnam and he loves this country. But in the last 3 years, he's come to the conclusion that with the inflation, the taxes, the government overreach and policies, it just feels like we're living in a communist country. Right now, he's seriously contemplating selling his house and moving to Vietnam. At least there, he can live like a king for well under what he spends here. It just seems like a no-brainer. He doesn't have to obsess over the ridiculous path that our government leaders are taking us on when he's too busy relaxing on the beach. Really, I wanted to argue with him on this, but it's hard to argue with someone who looks so happy. You know what I mean? Now, this is definitely a hot issue right now, so I highly recommend subscribing to the channel and tapping that notification bell. That way you'll know if it's ever time to move to Vietnam or whichever backup country you have. And we're not done with this one yet, guys, so don't go away. So first, I just want to give you a quick thanks for always supporting the channel, for always watching these videos, and of course, always lighting up the like button. Thank you guys so much. Now, let's get back to the show. So even with the humanitarian aid to Palestinians, Americans are divided. The Economist YouGov survey found respondents were evenly split when it comes to whether the U.S. should increase, decrease, or maintain the same amount of aid to Gaza, where millions of Palestinians have been displaced and have been lacking food, water, and other necessary supplies. Increasing humanitarian aid, decreasing humanitarian aid, and maintaining the same levels of aid each received 25% of support from Americans surveyed. Another 24% said that they were just unsure about the issue. When it comes to major foreign conflicts in Ukraine, Israel, and potentially Taiwan, Americans across the political spectrum prefer proposals that don't involve putting U.S. troops on the ground. Regarding U.S. involvement in the Israel-Hamas war, nearly 70% of Democrats and independents, as well as 2/3 of Republicans, favor policies that don't send American troops to the Middle East. The margin was similar for the Ukraine-Russia war, with 3/4 of Republican respondents and 68% of Democratic respondents preferring proposals that avoid sending troops. Even with a potential war between China and Taiwan, around 60% of Republicans and Democrats preferred strategies that did not send U.S. troops to the area. That's why more people are saying that they prefer Trump with his America First approach to foreign policy. For Trump supporters, Biden has got to go now, and they mean now. For them, if we don't get Trump back, it's going to be game over for our beautiful country. Hence, Trump 2024. Now, I think foreign policy could just be the thing to tip this election in Trump's favor. Political experts have always said that Americans don't usually cast their votes based on foreign policy stuff. I mean, let's face it though. When you got big economic or social issues on the table, foreign policy tends to take a back seat. But 2024 may just be the year when that changes. A whole bunch of recent polls suggest that Americans are increasingly concerned about foreign policy. One survey found that 4 in 10 voters rank the issue among their top concerns. And honestly, it's not as shocking as it sounds. I mean, we've been tangled up in 2 major wars abroad, and the whole China situation has got Americans feeling a little bit jittery. So yeah, foreign policy is kind of still in the spotlight in 2024 like never before. It's also partly thanks to politicians blurring the lines between stuff like domestic industrial policy and energy plans and even immigration with foreign policy and national security. It's like everything's getting wrapped up in this big global package deal. But really, what's more interesting to me is how the 2 main candidates for the president couldn't be any more different when it comes to their stand on foreign policy. Joe Biden is all in on foreign policy, making it a cornerstone of his presidency. Lately, his speeches have been all about connecting the stewardship of the war in Ukraine and support for Israel's war in Gaza to the survival of democracy here at home in America. I mean, heck, in his Oval Office spiel back in October, he straight up declared American leadership is what holds the world together. Whether you agree or not, Biden's clearly banking on leaving a mark as the foreign policy president, with democracy being the big ticket item for our era. Now, Trump? Well, he's always been about that harder-edged nationalist worldview, which is pretty much the opposite of Biden's vision of America as the world's police officer. Just the other day, he was telling his supporters he wouldn't protect NATO countries that didn't meet the alliance's defense spending targets. And from the way that he's been talking, he may already welcome a Russian attack on Europe. So it's really a choice between Trump's America First nationalism versus Biden's global pro-democracy crusade. And you'll probably hear both sides point out the cons of the other. Trump will undoubtedly argue that Biden is a globalist who puts foreign countries' needs above the interest of American voters, whether factory workers in Ohio or U.S. soldiers stationed in the Middle East. Biden, on the other hand, he's going to argue that Trump is an isolationist who doesn't understand the U.S.'s vital role as the indispensable nation promoting global peace and stability. But you got to wonder, with this whole showdown brewing and all the global craziness happening, it's probably not looking too rosy for Biden. Seems like more and more Americans are not too keen on the notion that Americans got to be the hero of the world. Young voters in particular are dubious about the Biden administration's commitment to human rights and appalled by his support for Israel's war in Gaza. But what do you guys think? Is it time for America to put America first? Drop a quick yes or no down in the comments down below and let me know what you guys think. And of course, let's remember to be civil, guys. I'll definitely be going through the comments to help develop our future content. Just make sure you guys always tune in, all right? I'll see you guys on the next one.